Greater than 2 Fall Hendersons. Near mythic levels. Unrepresentable by number in this or any scale. The action undertaken has undergone all steps above, except possibly the last one. Either way, the game somehow refuses to go away and die. Maybe the GM initiated the scratch, but the game remains in some form, screwing with the players. Only one person, to our knowledge, managed to actually do it. The Henderson scale of plot derailment. Meet the party. This is a story that I'm not proud of, where I lose my temper and utterly wreck a game, but I think it's a share-worthy story nonetheless. First time with this specific Pathfinder group. I found an ad for them somewhere, which I won't reveal for the sake of their privacy. I went there because I figured it'd be a fun experience, since almost all the games I play for like 5 years have been online in some way, rather than in person. I brought a couple boxes of cheap pizza with me, as my contribution to the snack table, and we get down to business. The GM. A big grizzly bear of a man. I'm a pretty tall guy, and he made me feel short. He was nice enough and fairly good-humoured, but he was a tad gruff and ham-fisted in some of his tactics for coaxing players through things. I'm probably being critical, though, all things considered. His game was basically Pathfinder, with 3.5's epic level progression rules, and a lot of 3.5 fluff. He also had a neat house rule about permanency, applying to any spell/psionic effect, for a standardized amount of gold for the spell's level, although they could be dispelled or disrupted as usual. I cringed when I heard that the story proper was going to be riddled with psionics, which I am far from a fan of, but I thought I'd grit my teeth and bear with it, despite my prejudice against them. The plot was basically that magic was slowly falling out of use, as more and more people spontaneously develop psionic powers, and the rest is the plot of the X-Men movies. I think that the GM didn't want to allow players to use psionics, but to be honest, I couldn't really tell because that went out of the window way before the session even began. We were level 20, supposedly the best of the best, and were supposedly going to be facing epic level challenges. Nancy No-Chin. A scrawny little guy with what appeared to be a missing chin. He was quiet and out of the way, and he never really did much OOC-ly, so I can't comment too much on his real character. He played a monk/psionic fist/soul fist variant, who was basically the stereotypical Zen master of self, I only want peace but will kill you guy of the party. The character was so bland, I don't even remember anything else about him. Fish Face. She wasn't ugly, but she was bug-eyed, and looked like she had silicone injections in her lips. Okay, she was pretty ugly, but she had the typical skinny bitch attitude like she was hot stuff. So, I couldn't help but superimpose a big carp over her every time I looked at her. It's probably for the best, because I was too distracted by this mental image to really pay attention to a lot of the stupid shit she said. She was at most times trying to drag politics or religion into debate, where it was non sequitur, or a red herring altogether. Her character was an annoying as shit Wilder, who was the typical fiery-tempered Mary Sue. She geared up to be the nuke of the party. Also, it was a fucking drow with trite wasp ethics. Yeah. The only decent player. Not me. A really big guy and not at all fun to look at, but he was mostly pleasant and seemed to know his stuff. He wanted to play a bard, but the GM convinced him to play something else, through the same means he convinced me to not be a UMD-focused rogue, min-max or GTFO, and he ended up going for a magus. It was kind of interesting because he played him like a tribal warrior shaman, whose tribe was in deep shit because of the developments in the more developed parts of the world, and was attempting to save his people from being disturbed by the recent events. He was also really creative in combat. All in all, I think he was the only one who put real effort into the game. That faggot. This guy gives a bad name to faggots everywhere. He had no concept of personal space and no concept of I'm not gay. Thankfully, he did have a concept of if you touch me there again, I'm going to pummel you and file a sexual misconduct suit. I suppose I'd be flattered if it was a woman, but god damn, this guy was a fucking creeper. It didn't help that his character was what I call OOC-ly, the date rape scion. Seriously, that faggot would probably turn people homophobic if they'd never met a normal gay guy before. Me. I was making a high charisma, trap-making, disabling, and UMD-focused rogue, but I was flat out told in so many words that I needed to make a min-maxed power gamey character or I wasn't going to get to play. I took offense, so I made a wizard. Stereotypical in dress, from the conial hat to the robes and tiny glasses. I wanted to give him a beard, but apparently in his setting, elves can't have facial hair, so I said his eyebrows grew down to his belt. It was an old fossil of an elf from back when magic was the milk and honey of the world, and was going to recruit anyone he saw with even a modicum of magical talent, in an ill-advised attempt to save the practice of magic in a world of pervasive psionics, by showing up on random people's doorsteps, telling their children that they were wizards, and spiriting them away to a permanent greater demiplane with a castle where his cohort would teach them magic. If you got the joke, you're smarter than most of this group. Most of my feats were item creation ones, so that I could have the wands and staves that I love to have in my arsenal. The story proper. Party strife just a few minutes in. It wasn't a good start. I was already being an asshat because I got sand in my cunt over being told to min-max or GTFO, and Fishface and that faggot were annoying as fuck too, which was adding to my ire. We finally start the session. We congeal off the walls of a high-end tavern in some urban area. Some plot, then we go wandering about. I spellcraft and detect magic any apprentice-age kid I see to try and discreetly determine if they have any talent. The GM blocks this at every turn for understandable reasons. I mean, it would derail things. Yet at the same time, the date rape scion was dragging NPCs off all the time and attempting to describe all the terrible things he was doing to them. I told him to knock it off more than the GM did, and the GM sent me a few warning glances about it. But seriously, I don't need to hear about the date rape scion unleashing all of his fetishes on villagers. The date rape scion also harassed my character Isili, but I slapped a protection from evil on myself, and he couldn't physically touch me for a while. I ended up making it permanent later, because I knew the little fucker was counting down for the spell to expire, so he could get on with touching my wizard inappropriately. Thankfully, I packed a lot of diamond dust with me, for some of my more powerful magic, and so I could see what I could do with my GM's very generous permanency house rules. The fiery-tempered Wilder Sue gave my character flack, calling him a paedophile, Isili, with great vindication as if it was the scummiest act imaginable, which was funny coming from a drow. Granted, I suppose some of his stuff with scouting students could appear a bit like that, but dear sweet Jesus, why target me and not the scion who was sneaking off to rape NPCs whenever we were pausing to investigate something? The Wilder continued to lambast me for reasons I didn't really understand, with which I retaliated with a long-winded, pontificating ramble about how magic was dying and why it needed to be passed on. This had a lot of old man rambling stereotypes about the good old days, with lots of Partridge Farms references, and I ate up a lot of time with that. Also, I did stop to occasionally note that my character was indeed going about his business and proceeding towards the obvious goal of the current plot point. It was about a minute into my good old days spiel before she started to talk over me with this weird line of dialogue. It was like she was projecting her hate for an ex onto my wizard and darvoing the fuck out of him, which got confusing fast, so I used Mrs. Cantrip to talk in her ear about the good old days and leave the general area so my wizard would be out of earshot. Yeah, I know message establishes a two-way conversation, but I argue that because magic was so obscure now, like someone being fluent in Esperanto in Asia, that she wouldn't know how without a spellcraft or knowledge arcana check of some kind. Fortunately, she didn't have either trained, and I got to be petty and talk about the good old days without having to listen to her Icely, or, thanks to the GM, Oocely either. I only kept it up for a couple minutes and went back to the plot right afterwards. The first PK attempt. The Wilder tried to PK me about 10 minutes later, when I rejoined the group after a brief detour. Apparently she was incensed at the fact that I found a cheap way to make it, so that I didn't have to listen to her, but could prattle on like the old man my character was. Luckily, I hadn't been flat-footed, having good sight of her, and won the initiative. So I beat her stupidly high spell resistance and turned her into a newt, because my wizard was all about the classics. One mage hand later, and I held her newtified character in my hand, and decided that I'd talk about why the newt baleful polymorph was such a classic. The date rape scion and the monk scion both decided to defend her character, and demanded that I release her at once. Not wanting everything to devolve into fighting, I played it off as if my wizard thought that they wanted her released into their custody, and told them that they looked like they could handle any of the kids' hissy fits. He handed her over and began to walk off, forgetting to undo the effect. They cleared their throats and got his attention about it, and I told them that they could hire a court mage to dispel it, and they reminded me that mages were almost extinct. Oh! I then dispelled the baleful polymorph and went, "Silly me!" and moved on. I think they were all pretty upset, save the mages, who was being all sage and witch doctor-like in the background of all this, and trying to keep the peace like a good guy. The second PK attempt. Fishface, No Chin, and That Faggot were clearly plotting since they take breaks to go off and huddle, and were passing notes during the session in what they probably thought was a discreet manner. Maybe it's my trained eye for catching students texting, but they were really obvious about it. I figured they were going to gang up on me at some point, so I just kept a scroll of plane shift in one hand, in case I had to escape, figuring being a wizard would let me excuse just happening to have a scroll ready. Fortunately, whatever was going to happen was put off when what was apparently the BBEG showed up to cause havoc and monologue at us. We were told that his awe-inspiring feats of psionic power were terrifying even to the likes of us, blah blah blah. We're obviously not supposed to fight him because he's too powerful. I would later find out that he was some level 40 scion / some psionic prestige class. Apparently he was trying to turn scions against non-scions, blah blah blah. Okay, he's a scion supremacist. Not Magneto! Fishface tries to get my wizard killed by the BBEG by attacking him, and rolling bluff to make it look like it was me before cheesing it. No Chin and That Faggot soon follow. The good guy Landwell stays for like a round before he gets out of there too, after my wizard assuring him that he'd be fine and to go. I was only really worried about losing my gear, since I had a cloning lab set up in my demiplane, and would just appear there with a couple negative levels and no items. Not that the others knew that. Those dicks just wanted my character to die. The BBEG looks at me and asks who dared to attack him. I played the part of a senile old man, picking up his scrolls, looking through them while failing to make a coherent statement. While doing this, I asked the GM for a planes check so that what I'm about to do isn't metagaming. My obscenely high planes roll lets me know, in the GM's words, everything about the plane of force, which was the specific plane that I wanted to know about. I managed to get out a read magic in the meantime, which the GM is nice enough to not make me roll int for, and I activate a scroll of time stop that I had retrieved in the confused old man act. I get lucky on the roll, and I've got 5 rounds to do whatever in. So what do? I cast Planar Adaptation on myself, pull out a scroll of gate, and slide on over to a specific point in the plane of force. The point that the biggest psionic connection is. Well, no more psions means no more BBEG. Because of the various books that the GM had informed me that he had been using, I knew on a meta level that psions are all connected to the plane of force. If you do it right, you can go on an Easter scavenger hunt and sever a psion's ties to the plane, which is a lot like forcibly making a cleric or paladin lose the favour of their god. All those abilities go bye-bye. Since the GM was so kind as to tell me that I knew everything about the plane of force, I thought I'd go and ruin the BBEG's day. Now, I only had 3 rounds left in my time stop, and I didn't really want to risk the BBEG figuring out what happened, and being trapped with a level 40 scion on the plane of force, wizard or not. So I got busy, and cast Gate. A gate to the point at the place between the negative energy plane and the quasi-elemental plane of void. I then take advantage of the GM's oh-so-generous permanency house rules and dump 25k gold worth of diamond dust, out of about 100,000 that I had on my person, on making that gate permanent. Not wanting to be there when the chaos from that started up, I renewed my time stop and plane shifted to the material world, and watched the unfolding chaos. Thanks to my second casting of Time Stop, I had another 2 rounds to do as I will, so I cast an extended black tentacles and greater invisibility on myself. After that, I just spammed minimized, empowered, innovates from a staff until the fucker died. With Psionics fizzling out of existence, he was a level 40 commoner. Thankfully, there are no saving throws versus innovation, so he died quickly, and the GM had no plot because Psionics didn't exist anymore. The plane of force was gone. The BBEG was dead, and there were no more psions anywhere. I then told the GM that my next step was to expand my attempts to teach magic, so as to fill the void created by missing psions. The first scratch. What? No, that can't be! The party can't win a few hours into the first session and take away all the plot. Retcon time. The GM changes it back to before I started casting Innovates, and then he got dramatic about the earth shaking from the wild things being thrown out, willy-nilly, by every psion in the material plane, and I managed to cast Psionic Resistance on myself, a spell that the GM had made available as an analog to spell resistance, since psions were everywhere, and that helped me avoid some nasty stuff that was being tossed in my direction. Every psion was apparently discharging every power point they had at random, because I used plane shift to get back to the material realm. The BBEG apparently still had his psionics under full control, and so I was confronted with a monologue of doom, with psionic chaos being thrown around in the midst of it for drama. I pull out another scroll of time stop, because I had an ass ton of the things, because why not? And then I cast planar adaptation on myself, and immediately left for one of my private demiplanes I had, without waiting for him to finish. The BBEG followed me through, what I assumed was GM Fiat. So I cop out and get a scroll of Greater Demiplane out of my handy haversack. A scroll because I don't have 6 hours to actually cast the spell, so I can add a new property to the demiplane we were standing in. I chose non-psionic. The second scratch. The GM stared at me blankly. I said that one of the many things you can do to a demiplane is make it so that there's no magic in it. Since he provided so many magical things that could affect psionics, like psionic resistance, detect psionics, and other things for the sake of the setting, and left it open to other things, I said that it was only logical that I could do it with a demiplane. He changed the rules again, saying that the psion's connection to the plane of force is inherently different from magic, and makes it so that a demiplane couldn't block it out. Even though there's such a thing as an anti-psionics field, but whatever. I personally think it was the GM not wanting his terrible BBEG to turn into a level 40 commoner again, but that's just my opinion. Since the GM vetoed letting me negate psionics, in this plane I had a bunch of constructs of mine crafting shit, because you can totally do that if you give them a brain. Expensive, but awesome. This demiplane had the fire-dominant elemental trait, so my constructs that healed with fire damage healed obscene amounts of HP per round, and already had a buttload of temp HP on top of their normal max because this is where they lived. So I cast Dimensional Anchor on the BBEG, and used my control over the constructs to just have them drop what they were doing, and mob him. After that, it was just a casting of Greater Invisibility, an anti-detection spell, and spamming maximized empowered innovations until the BBEG was dead again. The third scratch. At this point, I was just told, "You're out," and got thrown out of the host's house. The GM didn't even bother to rocks for me, he just told me I was out. No matter how many retcons the GM used, he couldn't think of a way to salvage his plot without writing me out of the game. And that is how I got kicked out of a Pathfinder group first session. Elsamore D&D/Pathfinder Pantheon Profile. TG banded together in support of this glorious wizard, who was revealed by the OP to be Elsamore. TG made the case for Elsamore's ascent to godhood, and he soon gathered a number of followers from TG. Soon afterwards, OP promised and delivered a profile of Elsamore as a minor deity. Elsamore. Wizard, teacher, minor deity. Elsamore is a minor deity, favoured by wrathful wizards and school teachers. He is known for being a patron of arcane studies and heading extermination of psionic creatures. Overview. Titles: God of Magic, Destruction, and planning patron of wizards and teachers. Patron of those who are sick of this shit. Adjective: Elsamoran. Alignment: neutral. Portfolio: Magic, schools, engineering, invention. Worshippers: Wizards, Mystic Thurges, Teachers, Summoners, Revolutionaries, Scion Hunters, and Exterminators. Cleric alignments: Lawful Good, Neutral Good, Chaotic Good, Lawful Neutral, Neutral, Chaotic Neutral, Lawful Evil, Neutral Evil, and Chaotic Evil. Domains: Magic, Knowledge, Destruction, Artifice, Liberation. Subdomains: Arcane, Memory, Toil, Revolution. Holy Symbol: a bronze golem with blue veins holding a chalice in his hands. Inside the chalice is a scroll of holy knowledge. Favoured weapon: touch attacks. Favoured enemy: psionics. Dogma: Elsamore and his followers wish to expand the horizon of magic, facilitate arcane pursuits whenever possible, facilitate general education and scholarly pursuits, and to eliminate forces of supernatural destruction, especially those with psionic or psi-like powers. Although Elsamoran Dogma advocates for patient teaching and subtle reprimand, Elsamore and his followers are known for wrath, especially in earth-shattering and paradigm-shifting ways, usually towards Elsamoran goals. It usually takes divine intervention from a more powerful deity to prevent Elsamorian revolutions. History. Elsamore was once a mortal, a powerful and gifted wizard. An elf that lived to see magic slowly fall out of use as psionic powers became widespread and abused. Elsamore became dedicated to preserving arcane magic. As corrupt scions began spreading havoc throughout his world, one enemy rose up to unite scions in an attempt to wipe out non-scions in a genocidal rampage. This entity was near godly in power, and Elsamore was forced to retaliate by unleashing the Null Zone upon the plane of force and depowering most, if not all, scions in his world, including that which conspired to exterminate non-scions. But this power would not just slay down and die. Time and space itself conspired against Elsamore, and forced him to face this godly entity thrice in combat, before Elsamore triumphed. The consequences, though, expunged Elsamore from the material plane, just as his glorious triumph made him a heroic god of magic and destruction. As word of Elsamore's triumph and exploits spread, followers began to gravitate towards his worship, and a dedicated following begun. Elsamore was no longer a mere heroic deity. Now, He is a patron to wizards, teachers, and revolutionaries big and small, fighting the good fight and promoting wizardry and education when not leading the extermination of troublesome scions. Some say that remaining scions are a sign of the dark entity that attempted to euthanize non-scions returning, and a new source of psionics emerging. Many followers of Elsinore take preventative measures to make sure this does not occur. Relationships to other religions. Elsinore and Elsimorans are known to be decidedly neutral to most other deities and their followers, live and let live. There are, however, notable exceptions to this. Religions that discourage arcane magic, discourage inventiveness, or promote psionics are violently opposed. Depictions. Elsinore is often described as an elven wizard, in long flowing robes with extremely exaggerated eyebrows. He is often depicted as standing on a large pile of scrolls and tomes. Divine intervention. The faithful believe that whenever scions or any other force would threaten the practice or knowledge of magic, Elsinore will use powerful magics to twist the cosmos and destroy such interlopers and their movements. Legend tells of the most promising wizards and other arcane casters are spirited away to Elsimore's realm to be personally taught by him. Schools of Elsinore. Temples and shrines. The temples of Elsinore are schools of arcane magics and, to a lesser extent, divine magics. Nations with high levels of casters, or magocracies, are known to have a large scattering of the schools of Elsinore. These schools seek out potential wizards, sorcerers, and other natural casters to teach. Mystic theurges are not an uncommon sight within the walls or in the vicinity. These places are supported by student work and research serving the general public, wealthy alumni, and to a lesser extent local governments. Despite their patron deity's known wrath and penchant for being worshipped by revolutionaries, the schools are known to be publicly neutral in all matters that do not directly concern the well-being of mages or magic, but mages being mages do at times meddle or participate in quests for fame and fortune. Worshippers and clergy. Elsinore is primarily worshipped by mages, teachers of both magical and mundane topics, revolutionaries and hunters of scions. Many of his worshippers hope to be guided in their pursuits with ancient wisdom and inspiration to act. The vast majority of Elsimore's clergy also know some arcane magics or work closely with those that do. Occasional paladins that worship Elsinore are known to protect centers of knowledge and to fight against those that would suppress the right to the pursuit of knowledge, and hunt down chaotic forces and evil or chaotic mages and scions that threaten the schools of Elsinore and Elsimoran values. Holy texts. Every book of knowledge is considered holy to Elsinore, especially spellbooks, but there is a coveted and legendary scripture that is said to be a copy of Elsimore's personal grimoire, filled with personal theories, advanced spells, and secrets of magic beyond most's wildest dreams. Legend has it that copies of these texts are only bestowed upon Elsimore's most devout followers and the most wise and powerful mages. Afterlife. Upon death, those who worship Elsinore, especially those who dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge, join Elsinore in his private realm. Each of his devout are free to learn from the one true university that resides in his plane, that contains the sum knowledge of all who pass through his hallowed halls. Great teachers, inventors, and mages often become a professor in the one true university, and pass on their knowledge to those that join Elsinore on his plane. Elsinore himself leads this institution, and teaches the best and brightest personally. Secrets gathered from some of the greatest minds to join Elsinore in the afterlife are passed on to the faithful through divine inspiration, visions, and Elsimore's greatest and wisest followers. The one true university is believed to be the pinnacle of knowledge, and is the ultimate destination of the greatest scholars and mages of the multiverse.